Ah, Thomas the Tank Engine. We haven't talked about it much on this channel, but when I do, there's always a rabid fan base that shows up after it's out. Well, today we're talking about the cancelled Thomas the Tank Engine project because that apparently exists. Titled as The Adventures of Thomas, this was a planned theatrical film from the Thomas and Friends franchise, with the production beginning in late 2009, which seems to be a running theme with cancelled episodes lately. We had a big batch of doing 2016 cancelled movies, and now 2009, I guess, was the next big thing. By that logic, there's going to be loads of cancelled movies in 2026, another 7 years later. Anyway, with the director Shane Acker on board, the plot was supposedly going to take place in London during World War II, and revolving around a preteen boy who has drifted apart from his father. The son is introduced to the world of Sodor, a place his father visited as a child but cannot remember, and there is a bonding experience. It is a vague plotline, and also a very interesting prompt. Once again, it's the idea of the world of Sodor, quite similar to the Magic Railroad. And we do actually know that this would have been, once again, a combination of live action and CGI. Even the idea of Thomas the Tank Engine taking place during World War II, I think there's some interesting, slightly dark undertones surrounding a lot of these kind of projects. There is a lot of dark Thomas the Tank Engine content, whether it's spin-off series, the horror original books, or the fact that apparently only in the British version is James the Train actually bricked up in a tunnel and never let out again. It's a very interesting franchise to learn the background details of the more I learn about it. I mean, in our past coverage of Thomas the Tank Engine and the Magic Railroad, I only just learnt about the explosive TNT guy that was deleted from the film. Anyway, this movie here would have also involved a steam versus diesel confrontation. And it kind of makes me think, what would they do nowadays with electricity getting into the mix? I'm sure Thomas has covered it in rife detail in the future. And we would have had Weta Digital as the production studio that was going to supply the CGI aspects of the film. And as for actual visuals, we do in fact have a poster image. Here it is. Now, this model of the E2 train was apparently created by Nitrogen Studios, just to really mix things up with companies getting involved in movies. And most of the other concept art we have of this movie is of the train. And it doesn't even have Thomas's face on it, it's very early days. But of course, it was going to supposedly create its own line of toys aimed at a much older audience. Which, I mean, considering the World War II aspects, yeah, I could see it. Why do I kind of want an adult form of Thomas the Tank Engine? There's some fun, creepy things you can do. If this poor character ever gets into, like, the public domain, we're in for a whole new vibe of horror movies. I can see it already. And even more so than that, apparently there were all sorts of extra bolsterings around this theatrical release, as it was potentially going to be the first in a potential series to go alongside the mainline Thomas and Friends TV series. Although this could very easily have just been speculation in the early days, since it sounded like a big project, and so you'd expect it to be a concurrent thing. Descriptions we have from the Weta Workshop, as well as Mattel Entertainment Design Group, is that the creative team behind the movie were trying to do a massive thing with the franchise by reimagining the core characters and the world in a way that will appeal to a wide kids and family audience, which is interesting. It's another reboot, essentially, with an interesting skin on top of it. Obviously, it's not a full-on adult movie, it's just slightly older than whatever the current age demographic is of Thomas. And perhaps they had cold feet over the idea of going for a slightly out of range for their normal audience demographic. We'll get into the more specific details of what went wrong later on, but still, at this point in the timeline, we would also know that the movie would have been distributed by Cinetic Media and UTA's independent film group, in conjunction with Hit Entertainment. Once again, it's too many corporations all involved in every single movie under the sun. And supposedly, the script had been fully written and completed in 2010. Of course, that script has not been leaked online in any form, but apparently it's made good progress. With an original schedule set for late 2010 as their release date, this would then be pushed back to spring of 2011, and then even further to 2012. You can sort of see where things are going. There were also apparently rumors of a 2013 and a 2014 release, and it just fell into development hell. And then, the big thing happened. Hey there, thank you for making it halfway through this video. This is just a quick plug to tell you to subscribe. If you're interested in more cancelled videos, we're going to try and do one a week this month. And let me know any suggestions you have over on our Discord server, if you like. Anyway, I'll let you get back to the rest of the Thomas the Tank Engine movie that's technically, I guess, a spiritual successor to Thomas and the Magic Railroad. What an accolade. And then, the big thing happened. This is the standard ending for most of our 2016 cancelled movie productions, except this is a 2012 update, as then Mattel would go on to purchase Hit Entertainment. It's your classic corporate reshuffling. Even though Mattel was involved in the early days, as we just saw with the Mattel Entertainment Design Group, ultimately this project was then cancelled after being pushed back several times following this acquisition. There are other speculative explanations for the cancellation, including the fact that the steam and diesel concept had already been done in other straight-to-DVD movies like Calling All Engines, and others saying it was due to the failure and poor reception of Thomas and the Magic Railroad, which I would kind of contest personally. I mean, not only is that movie a good 10 years earlier, so why would they think of even starting this production if it hadn't even had a successful original, but I also think this is a kind of strangely beloved movie. Perhaps that's just my weird nostalgia of a child that doesn't understand movies at the time he watched it. It is a weird movie, don't get me wrong, and it's not got great reviews, I'll give you that, but I feel like there's not that much of a disaster surrounding it as maybe the initial cancellation speculation would give. The Magic Railroad has 21% from critics on Rotten Tomatoes, but 42% by audiences, you know, we're pretty forgiving. Especially when I'm like 3. In addition to the fact that it just got lost to time, it was then buried by even more changes on the mainline Thomas franchise, as the Thomas and Friends series concluded in 2021 and was replaced with Thomas and Friends All Engines Go. A new Thomas movie was then announced in 2020 with Mark Forster as director, with an October 2025 release, and produced by Mattel Films and 2DUX Squared, or however the hell I'm meant to pronounce that. Of course, with the movie coming out so soon next year, and being announced back in 2020, it's probably no longer real. That release date or the movie. Although I do still see Thomas and Friends in development from Mark Forster's IMDb page, so maybe. Funnily enough, there were some other updates to this production in 2021, as we then in 2021 got further early version model images of the model used in the poster, which is incredibly niche and specific. Not only is it just a poster of a train, but we know all about how each model of train was designed. Crazy. With someone going as far as to describing all of the differences between the early version of this train and the more new, modern-ish 2010 version of this train. Again, it's still Thomas without a face, but it's now got a brass number plate, not a painted one. There's additional rivets on the valances, running boards, side tanks, and bunker. I didn't even know Thomas had a bunker. What is a bunker on a train? And it's painted to be a more saturated shade of blue. Wow. I even found a paragraph that said, this is the first time Thomas was portrayed with a Westinghouse air brake pump and a red running board drip outside of some merchandise lines, which were features on the real LB and SCRE2s. The names of the trains, I guess, but were never shown to be carried by Thomas. Crazy! You Thomas the Tank Engine fans and your just ability to understand every element of a train is honestly fascinating to me. And then as a final thing, Nitrogen Studios, as much as they've had all sorts of controversies that I mentioned earlier on this channel, would go on to give a thank you to fans before departing from the production apparently, rendering their Thomas model in an LBSC Southern livery. And with that, the movie disappeared, falling into its own production hell, being buried over by corporate shufflings, and now the Thomas brand continues on far into the distance. I would have been quite a fan of doing another Magic Railroad. It would have been weird. I wouldn't have understood half of it because I only know the British version of Thomas and Friends. But also expanding things to be slightly older with a World War II aesthetic is interesting to say the least. I certainly would have loved to have watched it even if it didn't necessarily thrive. But alas, that is the cancelled Thomas the Tank Engine movie. Maybe it's good riddance. The Magic Railroad is a fever dream of its own. Maybe we didn't need a second one. But with a fan base as motivated as the Thomas franchise is, I wouldn't be surprised if they do try and make another movie of that sort. Mixing Thomas with a more live-action cast does make him seem more magical and personal, which I personally enjoyed as a 3-year-old watching this Magic Railroad movie on the top of a bunk bed once. But otherwise, that is all there is to say. Not even any footage, unfortunately, this time around. But thankfully, the Magic Railroad can cover us plenty for the background footage for this video. On that note, I shall be ending things off there. My name's been Daz, thank you very much for reaching the end of this video, and I shall see you in a little bit.